way, the Hillary Clinton campaign is trying to weather a political and legal storm that came out of nowhere. The renewed FBI investigation into her emails has thrown the presidential race into disarray, with neither side knowing what further surprises might lie in store, or whether this could truly cost the Democrats the White House. Amid it all, Mrs. Clinton has tried to keep her focus and remind Americans of the stakes.
We won't be distracted no matter what our opponents throw at us. We're not going to be knocked off course. We know how much this election matters, and we know how many people are counting on us.
Donald Trump continues to marvel at his luck at this last-minute reprieve from his own campaign problems, including those allegations that he sexually assaulted a number of women. At a rally last night, Trump relentlessly mocked Mrs. Clinton and the quantity of emails reportedly being probed.
This could be the mother lode, you know? This could be the 33,000 that are missing. This could be the 20,000 that are missing.
FBI Director James Comey released to Congress.
The backlash against the FBI director is growing. Democrats say Comey's vague letter to Congress was outrageous political interference and has cast a shadow over Mrs. Clinton's candidacy. But it's an open question whether this will cost Mrs. Clinton the election. Early voters we spoke to here in Ohio said they had long ago made up their minds.
Emails mean nothing. I take seriously what Donald has done. You know, that we saw with our eyes and ears, you know, how he speaks about women.
Since the FBI has no idea what's in the emails, they haven't even looked at them, eventually the voters will see that it should have no bearing on the election at this point.
Mrs. Clinton will be here shortly to galvanize her supporters and steady campaign nerves. But who would have imagined that America's top law enforcement official would stand accused of committing a crime himself, breaching an act that demands political neutrality, even potentially of having changed the outcome of a presidential election?
Our correspondent Penny Marshall is following the Republicans in Detroit. Penny, this time last week, Donald Trump's campaign looked doomed. What is it looking like now?
Well, Nina, I've been following Donald Trump and his team for the last few days, and it doesn't look or feel like a doomed campaign anymore. They at least feel they've been thrown a lifeline, and it's a lifeline that they are willing to exploit in this final week right up to voting day and exploit it all the way to the White House as far as they're concerned. It's too early, as Robert said, to be sure that it will affect the floating voters and those who haven't made their mind up, whether it will just harden opinion. But it's certainly absolutely divided, or an already divided country. And when you travel around here, you get a sense that this really is a country on a knife edge. Countdown to election day, only 8 days to go, and Donald Trump sensing advantage, and I'm afraid even smelling blood at some of his rallies.
Penny Marshall, thank you. Well, let's hear more now from Robert Moore, who's in Cleveland. Robert, an election, as we know, of twists and turns. What does Hillary Clinton do now?
Well, Hillary Clinton will be appearing here shortly for her first rally of the day. What she really has to do is hope that undecided voters buy into her core narrative that the FBI have treated her unfairly. And it does seem pretty absurd that the FBI director would cloak her candidacy in this sort of aura of suspicion without anybody knowing what the content of those emails are. So on the other hand, though, it is fair to say that inside the campaign, the more seasoned operatives are sort of suggesting they should be calm, that actually the fundamentals of this race haven't changed. So long as she can win those key battleground states like Pennsylvania and North Carolina, she will block Donald Trump's path to victory in the Electoral College vote. But it's also fair to say, if you look further down the road, I mean, there is certainly, even if she wins, going to be a governance issue, because both the FBI and Republicans will have her in their crosshairs. So a very partisan Washington could very quickly become a paralyzed Washington.
Robert Moore in Ohio, thank you. Here, the Home Secretary is expected to announce later this afternoon whether to hold an inquiry into one of the most notorious incidents of the miners' strike in 1984. The so-called battle at Orgreave involved major clashes between picketers and police. Campaigners claim police officers were excessively heavy-handed, with statements later doctored to discredit the protesters. Our deputy political editor, Chris Shipp, reports.
The slogan of the Orgreave campaigners is never forget, never forgive. And as the Home Secretary prepares to announce if she's allowing an inquiry into events that June day in 1984, some of those who were there were outside her office this morning. Their view is clear. Police force was excessive and an inquiry is necessary.
It is a miracle that the days leading up to the 18th, somebody weren't killed, and especially on the 18th, when the horses just went mad. Truncheoning everybody, and then when they'd done nothing at all wrong.
The Battle of Orgreave was a pivotal moment in the miners' strike of the mid-1980s. It happened at British Steel's coking plant near Rotherham in South Yorkshire.
The first cavalry charge came a few minutes later, and it clearly worried the pickets.
Were these charges by mounted police on the thousands of picketing miners justified in order to keep the peace? Or were police ordered to turn this into a battle in an attempt to make an example of the miners here? In total, 95 miners were arrested and charged with rioting and unlawful assembly. A year later, all the trials collapsed due to unreliable police evidence. No officer was ever disciplined, but compensation was paid out to 39 miners. And this involved the same police force as the one responsible for Hillsborough 5 years later.
Obviously, the miners' strike was a difficult period in our history. I think we now need to know fully what happened so we can move on. After Hillsborough, the evidence trail led very directly to Orgreave. It's no good the government saying now that it's different. It's not. They need to order this inquiry today.
This is the site at Orgreave today. 32 years later, those involved here will know this afternoon if the violence they witnessed merits a public inquiry. Now, as we stand here right now, even the Orgreave campaigners do not know what decision the Home Secretary has made. Amber Rudd will announce that in a form of a written statement within the next hour. She will then take questions from MPs on the floor of the House of Commons. But as you've probably gathered, for Orgreave campaigners, they will accept nothing less than a full public inquiry.
Chris Shipp, thank you. Still to come on the programme, an incredible Pride of Britain winner.
Do a few dabs of that, tap it off a bit and just put it all over my cheekbone.
The 12-year-old YouTube star inspiring others by sharing her makeup tips with millions. But first, the Italian authorities say that more than 15,000 people have been forced out of their homes following yesterday's earthquake. It was the strongest quake to hit the country in 36 years, but incredibly, there were no deaths or serious injuries. Sally Biddulph has the latest on the clear-up.
The main square in Norcia. Buildings which have stood for centuries stand no more, destroyed by yesterday's earthquake. The Basilica of St Benedict, thought to have been built on his birthplace, a monument to the patron saint of Europe, now rubble in the heart of the continent. Thousands of people queued to spend the night in temporary shelters, just grateful to be alive. We were inside our home, says this woman, and luckily it handled it. That allowed us to get out into the streets. Many were injured, but we were lucky. Rescuers are combing the area for casualties, but outside of the main towns, you can see from the air the extent of their task is overwhelming. Roads have collapsed, access and communication is impossible. The quake ripped through a swathe of central Italy already badly damaged in August. The mountain village of Pescara del Tronto is one of the many now completely cut off and flattened. The only glimmer of hope among all this destruction is that despite many injuries, no one has been killed. Sally Biddulph, ITV News.
Here, appeal court judges have refused to overturn a series of convictions in a case which could have led to hundreds of murder trials being ruled unsafe. They've been asked to re-examine what's called the joint enterprise rule, which the Supreme Court decided had been misinterpreted for 30 years. Sejal Karia is outside court. What did campaigners want in terms of why did they want this law to be changed?
Well, they believe that the men in these test cases were unfairly convicted of murder and that they've been victims of a widespread miscarriage of justice. It all boils down to, as you say, this controversial legal principle of joint enterprise. The men's supporters believe that they've been found guilty by association and that they did not participate in the fatal attack which killed a victim and could not have predicted or prevented that attack and were found guilty of murder. Well, the judges in today's ruling said that their convictions were safe and that the law was applied correctly. But the men's supporters could barely contain their fury. In court, they shouted, "Shame on the court and shame on you," to the judge. One of those convicted under this principle was Jordan Cunliffe, one of 3 men convicted of murdering Gary Newlove outside his home in Warrington in 2007. And he said whilst he was there when Mr. Newlove was assaulted, which eventually killed him, he didn't take part in that assault. His mother, Janet, told me today that she was very angry about today's ruling.
Disappointed. I kind of had a good feeling about today because we've had such a good movement over the last 12 months and the Supreme Court came out in our favour. To then have all of that thrown back in our faces today, the Supreme Court might as well have never happened.
Well, Mrs. Cunliffe and all the other mothers and families say they will continue their fight.
Sejal Karia, thank you. One of the candidates to be the next leader of UKIP has pulled out of the race. Raheem Kassam only declared he'd be standing on Friday, but now he says he's not satisfied with the integrity of the process. And a group of MPs say the government is wrong to claim it's spending £10 billion on the NHS in England over the next 5 years. They say the figures have been reached by moving budgets around to create a false impression, and the increase is actually half that amount. Next, the Pride of Britain Awards honours some of the country's most inspiring men, women and children. This year will be no exception. The winners will receive their prizes tonight. Nikki Christou has won the Child of Courage Award. Before we meet her, let's see her in action on her very own YouTube channel where she gives makeup tips to millions.
Just do a few dabs of that, tap it off a bit and just put it all over my cheekbone. I really like this.
Well, Nikki's beauty vlogging and baking tutorials have already won her thousands of followers and fans, 95,000 and counting. The confident 12-year-old also uses her channel to give advice to others, given she copes with a rare medical condition which has seen her go through hundreds of operations and has left her with a severe disfigurement.
I get a lot of comments on my videos saying what's wrong with her face, what's wrong with your face, did anything happen to your face? And I don't mind you guys asking, seriously.
I'm delighted to say Nikki is here along with her mum Tanya. Thank you both for coming in. I'm going to join those people to ask you to tell me a little bit more about the condition which has disfigured part of your face.
Yeah, so I have an AVM and it stands for arterial venous malformation, and basically in my face on the right side you have arteries, capillaries and veins, and in some of the places in my face I don't have the capillaries where they need to be, so it can cause me to have life-threatening nosebleeds where they can come out of my mouth, my tear ducts, and also severe headaches.
You've been nominated for this award.
Yeah.
You've given so much advice and help to other people, a real courageous thing to do. What made you decide to use makeup to give you you confidence and also to give other people confidence?
I think because I was a very active child before I got diagnosed, and when I got diagnosed I felt quite isolated as to what hobbies I had left to do. So I think makeup was just something that I sort of found by blip through watching videos on YouTube and thought, well, they're sort of trying things out with makeup, why can't I? And it's been an amazing confidence
What
booster.
sort of reaction have you had? We're just seeing you demonstrating how to apply foundation and concealer, maybe. What sort of reaction?
Yeah, the reaction's been so amazing, really, really positive. Of course, you are going to get the odd negative comment, but I've had so many amazing comments that, like, some so intense of people saying, you know, you've changed my life, and it's amazing that something that was just a hobby to me has done something like that to someone.
How old were you when you were diagnosed?
I was 6 when I was diagnosed, but I was born with my AVM.
Mum, what was it like to get that diagnosis from your point of view?
So we didn't really know a lot about it initially because it's a rare condition. But, you know, when the doctors told us about Nikki's condition and said because Nikki's condition was basically going to be very difficult to treat, we were devastated. And slowly Nikki's life became more and more isolated and used filming videos as a way of dealing with her isolation.
And what do you make of her now that she's broadcasting to millions of people, thousands of followers?
She truly is amazing to us. I mean, she inspires us every day, but it's not just us. I mean, clearly she's inspiring people from all around the world because I think she sees that every day is a second chance and that we can all be beautiful. It doesn't matter what you look like. She's kind of sort of raised the platform and said, you know, this is me and this is what I do.
You're heading to the ceremony now. Have a fantastic night, Tanya.
Thank you so much.
And Nikki, thank you so much for joining us. Have a brilliant night.
Lovely. Thank you.
And you can see that Pride of Britain Awards ceremony on ITV tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. That's all we've got time for so far today. Mary Nightingale and Alistair Stewart will be here with the ITV Evening News from me. Bye-bye.